I never imagined that my dream wedding would turn into a nightmare that would change my life forever. The morning had started perfectly. Sunlight streamed through the Grand Plaza Hotel's tall windows, casting a warm glow on the ballroom's cream-colored roses and lilies. My hands trembled as I adjusted my white lace dress for the final time. My reflection in the mirror was everything I'd dreamed of. A beautiful bride, the picture of happiness. "You look stunning," Lisa whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "Tom is going to be speechless." But as the wedding progressed, a knot of worry grew in my chest. Something was off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. I never imagined that my dream wedding would turn into a nightmare that would change my life forever. The morning had started perfectly, just as I had always envisioned it. The sun streamed through the tall windows of the Grand Plaza Hotel in downtown Chicago, casting a warm golden glow over the cream-colored roses and lilies that filled the ballroom. My hands trembled as I adjusted my white lace dress for the final time. The mirror reflected the image I had dreamed about since I was a little girl, a beautiful bride on her perfect day. My best friend Lisa stood beside me, helping me with my veil. "You look stunning," she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "Tom is going to be speechless when he sees you." I smiled, trying to calm the butterflies in my stomach. Everything was perfect. The string quartet played softly in the background, the champagne was chilling, and our 200 guests were starting to arrive. But there was this small knot of worry in my chest, one I couldn't quite shake off. You see, Tom's mother, Karen, had been difficult throughout our entire engagement. She criticized everything, from my choice of venue to the flavor of our wedding cake. "A proper wedding should be in a church," she'd say, "and white roses are so basic." But I brushed it all off, convinced that once the wedding day arrived, she'd finally accept me as part of the family. The ceremony went smoothly. Tom looked so handsome in his black tuxedo, and when he said, "I do," I truly believed this was the beginning of our happily ever after. The problems started during the reception. I was sitting at the main table taking a brief moment to rest my feet from all the dancing when I saw Karen approaching. She was dressed in an expensive navy blue gown that probably cost more than my entire wedding dress, her silver hair perfectly styled, her face already wearing that familiar look of disapproval. The music played, and guests laughed and danced, but somehow, I could hear her heels clicking on the floor, getting louder with each step. That sound seemed to echo in my ears like a countdown to something I couldn't yet understand. "Amy," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the joy of the celebration. "Why are you sitting down when there aren't enough chairs for everyone? I've been standing for 20 minutes. I looked around, confused. There were plenty of empty chairs scattered throughout the reception hall, but before I could say anything, I saw Tom walking toward us, his face already clouding with concern. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking between his mother and me. "Your wife," Karen spat the word like it tasted bitter, "is being incredibly disrespectful. She's sitting here like a queen while I've been forced to stand." I started to rise, trying to explain, but Karen's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "This is exactly what I warned you about, Tom," she said. "She has no respect for family, no proper upbringing." My heart pounded. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but I could feel it slipping away, turning into something completely different. I never expected what happened next. Tom's face changed. The loving look I had seen during our vows vanished, replaced by something cold, distant, and unfamiliar. His mother's words seemed to transform him into someone I didn't recognize. And then, in front of our friends, family, and everyone we knew, he did the unthinkable. The sound came first, a sharp crack that seemed to freeze time. Then came the burning sensation across my cheek, and finally, the realization that Tom, my husband of just 4 hours, had slapped me in front of everyone. The reception hall fell silent. The music kept playing, some upbeat love song that now felt like a cruel joke. My ears were ringing, and I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. Someone gasped, a glass shattered somewhere in the distance. How dare you disrespect my mother like this? Tom's voice was cold and unfamiliar. He stood over me, his hand still raised, his wedding ring catching the light. After everything she's done for us. I touched my cheek, still not quite believing what had just happened. The perfect makeup I'd spent hours on that morning was now stained with tears I hadn't even realized were falling. Lisa, my maid of honor, was the first to move. She rushed toward me, but Karen stepped between us, her face twisted in a triumphant smirk. "Now you see," she announced to the stunned crowd, "what kind of person my son married. No class, no respect." The words hit harder than the slap. I looked around the room, desperately searching for someone, anyone, to stand up for me. My parents had left early due to my dad's health. My sister was on her honeymoon. The faces I saw were a blur of shock, pity, and discomfort, but no one moved. No one spoke. "Tom," I whispered, my voice shaking. "How could you?" But the man looking back at me wasn't the person I'd fallen in love with. His eyes were cold and distant, like a stranger. He straightened his tie, a gesture so normal it seemed bizarre in this nightmare moment. "You brought this on yourself," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My mother deserves respect. If you can't give her that, maybe we made a mistake today." The string quartet had stopped playing. The only sounds were the hum of the air conditioning and the muffled sobs I was trying desperately to hold back. My white dress felt too tight, too heavy, like it was suffocating me. Then my phone buzzed in my hidden dress pocket, a text from my mother. "Hope you're having the time of your life, sweetie. You deserve all the happiness in the world." The message broke something inside me. I stood up, my legs shaking. The chair scraped against the floor, the sound echoing in the silent hall. Karen stepped closer to Tom, placing her hand on his arm possessively. The diamond bracelet he bought her for Christmas glinted under the chandelier lights. "I need some air," I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange to my ears. As I turned to leave, I heard Karen's voice, sharp and clear. "Drama queen, just like I told you, Tom. She's not good enough for our family." I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Each step felt like an eternity. The train of my dress dragged behind me, catching on something, probably Karen's foot, but I kept walking. I couldn't let them see me break down. Not here, not now. Just before I reached the door, I heard the whispers start. The crowd was coming back to life, like a spell had been broken. Someone called my name. Maybe Lisa, maybe one of my cousins, but I couldn't stop, couldn't turn around, couldn't face what my perfect day had become. The cool evening air hit my face as I pushed through the heavy doors. The Chicago skyline sparkled in the distance, indifferent to my world crumbling apart. I had just taken my first steps into a nightmare I never saw coming, and somehow I knew this was only the beginning. I found myself in the hotel's garden, collapsing onto a stone bench hidden behind a row of perfectly trimmed bushes. The music from the reception had started again, the muffled sound of "At Last" drifting through the walls, the song that was supposed to be for our first dance. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, texts from friends, family, and even guests I barely knew. I turned it off. I couldn't deal with their pity or questions right now. The only person I wanted to talk to was Lisa, and as if on cue, I heard her calling my name. "Oh my God, sweetie." She appeared around the corner carrying my overnight bag and purse. Her mascara was smeared, she'd been crying too. "I grabbed your things. We need to get you out of here." "What's happening in there?" I asked, not sure I wanted to know the answer. Lisa sat beside me, her blue bridesmaid dress crinkling. "Tom's telling everyone you had a panic attack. His mother's playing the concerned mother-in-law, saying she always worried about your mental stability." She grabbed my hand. "Some people are buying it." I let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. $400 worth of waterproof mascara was no match for this moment. "I married a stranger, didn't I?" "No," Lisa said firmly. "You married a liar. There's a difference, and we're going to deal with this. But not here, not now. My car's out front. As we walked through the hotel's side entrance, I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror. The bride staring back at me looked like a character from a tragic movie, smeared makeup, red cheek, tears cutting trails through her foundation. The diamond ring on my finger felt like it was burning my skin. Lisa drove us to her apartment across town. Neither of us spoke during the ride. The only sound was the swish of my wedding dress against the car seat and the occasional alert from her phone. Later, she told me Tom had called her 7 times, switching between apologies and threats. It wasn't until we were safely inside her apartment, 2 glasses of wine in hand and the deadbolt securely locked, that I finally let everything come crashing down. "I don't understand," I sobbed, still in my wedding dress curled up on Lisa's couch. "Everything was perfect during our engagement. He was perfect." Lisa handed me a makeup wipe and sat cross-legged on the floor, her bridesmaid dress pooling around her. "Maybe that's exactly what he wanted you to think. Remember when he insisted you move in with him right after the engagement, away from your friends? How he always had an excuse for his mother's behavior? The signs were there," she said. Small things I had dismissed or explained away were suddenly so clear. The way he'd check my phone when he thought I wasn't looking. How he'd grow quiet and distant when I spent time with my friends. His mother's constant demands and his insistence that I just keep the peace. "I have to face them tomorrow," I whispered, the thought making my stomach twist. The brunch, the gift opening, all those people. "No, you don't," Lisa said firmly. She pulled out her laptop. "You're staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll get you a good lawyer. I've already called my cousin Rachel. She specializes in domestic violence cases." Domestic violence? The words felt foreign on my tongue. That wasn't me. I wasn't a victim. I was a successful marketing executive who'd graduated top of my class. I was strong, independent. I was Mel. Lisa interrupted my thoughts, her voice gentle but resolute. "He hit you in public on your wedding day in front of witnesses. If he could do that then, what would he do in private?" The truth of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked down at my wedding dress, at the delicate lace I had spent months picking out. Everything it had represented, love, trust, new beginnings, had been shattered in an instant. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lisa squeezed my hand. "First, we document everything while it's fresh, the slap, the witnesses, what was said. Then we call Rachel. And then," she managed a small smile, "we get you out of that dress and into some pajamas. One step at a time." As I sat there, letting Lisa help me out of my wedding dress, something shifted. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one I never wanted, but had no choice but to face. And somehow, through the tears, shock, and fear, I knew I would survive it. The morning after my wedding day, I woke up on Lisa's couch to 37 missed calls and over 50 text messages. Most were from Tom and his mother, ranging from angry accusations to tearful apologies. But one message caught my eye. It was from Megan, Tom's ex-girlfriend from college. "I saw what happened on social media," her message read. "The same thing happened to me. If you need someone to talk to, or if you need help, please reach out." I sat there, still in Lisa's borrowed pajamas, staring at my phone. A cold, heavy feeling settled in my stomach as pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Tom had always said Megan was crazy and obsessive. Now I wondered whose version of the story was the truth. Rachel, Lisa's lawyer cousin, arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. She wasn't what I expected: young, wearing jeans and a blazer, with a no-nonsense attitude that made me feel less like a victim and more like someone taking control. "Let's start with the facts," she said, opening her laptop. "You have multiple witnesses to the assault. We have photos from right after." She glanced at my cheek, which had developed a faint bruise. "And based on these texts, he's already trying to gaslight you about what happened." As we talked, more messages started pouring in. Friends sharing videos they'd taken at the wedding, not of the happy moments but of the incident. Tom's mask had slipped in front of everyone, and people had their phones out. "This is helpful," Rachel said, saving the videos. "But we need more. The physical assault is clear, but I'm more concerned about patterns of controlling behavior. Tell me about your engagement." Over the next 2 hours, I talked about how Tom convinced me to quit my job at a major advertising firm because he made enough for both of us. How Karen would show up unannounced at our apartment and Tom would say I was being selfish if I complained. How my friends gradually stopped inviting me out because Tom always had a reason why I couldn't go. "Plastic isolation tactics," Rachel muttered, typing rapidly. "And financial control, too." Then Megan called. Her voice was shaking as she told her story. 3 years ago, she'd been engaged to Tom. The wedding was called off after he threw a glass at her during their engagement party. Karen had convinced everyone Megan was drunk and making scenes. No one believed her side of the story. "I tried to warn his next girlfriend," Megan said. "But Karen threatened to sue me for defamation. I have all the emails saved." By afternoon, my inbox was flooded with messages from other women. Tom's high school girlfriend, a woman he dated briefly between Megan and me. Even Karen's former daughter-in-law from her second marriage. Each story was different, but the pattern was the same. Control, isolation, public humiliation, and Karen always there, enabling and covering up. "This is bigger than just your case," Rachel said, looking up from her notes. "We're seeing a pattern of abuse across multiple relationships, and his mother, she's not just enabling, she's actively participating." Lisa, who'd been quiet most of the morning, suddenly spoke up. "Remember their family Christmas party? How did Karen keep making those weird comments about your weight, and Tom just laughed?" I nodded slowly. "He said it was just her way of showing she cared, that she was worried about my health." "More like she was testing boundaries," Rachel said. "Seeing how much you'd take, how much she could control." My phone buzzed again. Another text from Tom. "Baby, please come home. Mom feels terrible. We can fix this. Remember our vows for better or worse." I showed Rachel the message. She shook her head. "Classic manipulation. He's trying to use your commitment against you. Don't respond." Instead, I opened Megan's message again and started typing, "I believe you, and I could use your help." By evening, we had a plan. Rachel would file for an emergency restraining order first thing Monday morning. Lisa would help me move my things out of Tom's apartment while he was at work. Megan and 2 other ex-girlfriends agreed to testify about their experiences. "This won't be easy," Rachel warned as she packed up her things. "They're going to fight back hard. Karen has money and connections. Are you ready for that?" I looked down at my wedding ring, then slowly slid it off my finger. The indentation it left behind would fade, just like the bruise on my cheek, but the strength I was finding wouldn't. "I'm ready," I said, not just for me but for Megan and anyone else they might hurt. It's time someone stood up to them. As Rachel left, Lisa ordered pizza and pulled out a bottle of wine. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To the truth," I added, thinking of all the women who'd reached out, all the stories finally being told. The sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere across town, Tom and Karen were probably planning their next move, but for the first time since the slap, I wasn't afraid. I was angry and ready to fight back. Monday morning came faster than I expected. The bruise on my cheek had turned a yellowish purple, impossible to completely cover with makeup. As I walked into the courthouse with Rachel, I could feel people staring, not just at my face, but at the thick folder of evidence we carried. "Remember," Rachel said as we waited outside the judge's chambers, "stick to the facts. No matter what they say or do, stay calm." We didn't have to wait long to see what she meant. Tom and Karen arrived with their lawyer, a tall man in an expensive suit who looked like he charged more per hour than I used to make in a week. Karen wore all black, like she was at a funeral, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Amy." Tom stepped toward me, his voice soft and pleading. "Baby, we don't need to do this. Come home. We can work this out. Rachel stepped between us. My client has a restraining order petition. Please maintain your distance. The hearing was brutal. Tom's lawyer painted me as unstable, attention-seeking, a gold digger who'd planned this all along. Karen took the stand, tears flowing perfectly on cue. I just wanted to be a good mother-in-law, she sobbed. I tried so hard to welcome her into our family, but she was always so cold, so disrespectful. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, my legs shaking but my voice steady. The videos played on the courtroom screen, the slap, the aftermath, all of it in horrible clarity. I described the isolation, the control, the manipulation. Then Rachel presented her surprise. Megan was there to testify. Tom's face went pale when Megan walked in. Karen's perfectly crafted mask slipped for just a moment, showing the rage beneath. Megan told her story, her voice growing stronger with each word. Then came the emails, the threats, the pattern of abuse that had been hidden for years. Your Honor, Rachel said, this isn't just about one incident at a wedding. This is about a systematic pattern of abuse, enabled and encouraged by the defendant's mother. The judge, a woman in her 60s, looked at the evidence in silence. The room was so quiet I could hear my heartbeat. Finally, she spoke. I'm granting the restraining order, she announced. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for review of possible criminal charges. Karen erupted. This is ridiculous. We are a respected family. You can't believe these lies. Mrs. Johnson, the judge's voice cut through Karen's protests. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. The videos had gone viral over the weekend, and our story had struck a nerve. Tom and Karen pushed past the cameras, but I stopped. Rachel squeezed my hand supportively. Are you sure about this? She whispered. I nodded. It was time to speak up. My name is Amy Turner, I began, facing the cameras. 3 days ago, I was slapped by my new husband at our wedding for not giving up my chair to his mother. But this isn't just about a chair or a slap. This is about breaking the silence around domestic abuse. The cameras flashed as I continued. To any woman who's been told she's overreacting, who's been made to feel crazy for speaking up, who's been controlled and isolated, you're not alone, and it's not your fault. Lisa and Megan stepped up beside me, then 2 other women who'd been hurt by Tom and Karen. We stood together, stronger than any of us had been alone. The story exploded. By nightfall, it was on every local news channel. Wedding Day Justice started trending on social media. Women began sharing their own stories of abuse and manipulation. What had started as my nightmare was becoming a movement. That evening, as I sat in Lisa's apartment watching the coverage, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Is this Amy Turner? A woman's voice asked. I'm a producer with Good Morning America. We'd like to tell your story. I looked at Megan and Lisa, who were sitting with me. They both nodded encouragingly. Yes, I said, my voice firm. I have a story to tell. The truth was finally coming out, and there was no going back now. The Good Morning America interview changed everything. Sitting there under the bright studio lights wearing a blue dress Lisa had picked out to show strength, I told my story to millions of viewers. But this time I wasn't just talking about the slap. It starts small, I explained to the sympathetic host. A comment about your friends here, a suggestion about your job there. Before you know it, your whole world has shrunk to just them and their approval. The segment aired on a Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, our story had gone national. More women came forward, not just about Tom, but sharing similar stories of abuse hidden behind perfect social media posts and family reputations. Then came the bombshell. Karen's first daughter-in-law, Catherine, saw the interview and finally broke her silence. She'd been keeping quiet for 20 years, afraid of losing access to her children. Now, with her kids grown, She was ready to talk. Karen and her son Thomas, my ex-husband, did the same thing to me, she revealed in a follow-up interview. The public humiliation, the gaslighting, the control, it's a family pattern. The evidence kept mounting. Financial records showed how Tom and Karen had systematically taken control of my accounts after our engagement. Security footage from our apartment building showed Karen letting herself in whenever I was alone, something Tom had always denied happening. But the real turning point came when Karen's mask finally cracked completely. Confronted by reporters outside her country club, she exploded. "These girls!" she screamed, her face twisted with rage. "They're all the same. Weak, ungrateful, not good enough for my sons. I was trying to make them better." The video went viral instantly. Karen the Enabler started trending. The very thing Karen had valued most, her social standing, crumbled overnight. Her charity board positions, her prestigious club memberships, her meticulously crafted image, all of it was gone in the blink of an eye. Tom tried to do damage control, but it was too late. His firm placed him on leave pending an investigation. Former clients came forward with allegations of aggressive behavior and financial manipulation. The perfect family image they had worked so hard to project shattered completely. 6 months after what should have been my wedding day, I sat in the final divorce hearing. Tom didn't show up. His lawyer explained that he was in treatment. Karen wasn't there either. She'd reportedly moved to Florida to escape the growing harassment. In light of the evidence presented, the judge announced, "This court grants the divorce on the grounds of cruelty. The restraining order will remain permanent." Outside the courthouse, my support system was waiting for me. Lisa, Megan, Catherine, and dozens of other women who had become like family. We had formed a support group, meeting weekly to share stories and offer strength. "What now?" Lisa asked as we celebrated that evening. I looked around at these incredible women who had helped me find my voice. "Now we help others," I said. "This can't just be about us." We started a foundation, Wedding Day Warriors, to help women recognize and escape abusive relationships. Our first fundraiser raised enough money to help 20 women start fresh. The slap that was meant to break me had, instead, sparked a wave of change. 1 year to the day after my disastrous wedding, I stood on a different stage, this time giving a keynote speech at a domestic violence conference. The bruise had long faded, but the lessons hadn't. "Abuse doesn't always look like what we expect," I told the audience. "Sometimes it hides behind designer clothes and perfect family photos. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a mother-in-law's criticism. But here's what I've learned. The truth has power, and when we stand together, we're stronger than any abuser's lies." I eventually moved away from Chicago, starting fresh in Seattle. My marketing career flourished, and I even began dating again slowly, cautiously, but with hope instead of fear. As for Tom and Karen, last I heard they had both left Chicago as well. Their perfect facade had crumbled, leaving only the truth behind. Sometimes I think about that wedding day slap, the moment of public violence that exposed years of hidden abuse. But mostly I think about the women I've met since then. The ones who found their voice after hearing my story, the ones who realized they weren't crazy or oversensitive, the ones who got out in time. That's the thing about truth. Once it starts coming out, it can't be stopped. One story becomes many. One voice becomes a chorus, and somewhere out there, another woman is finding the strength to say, "Enough." Could Tom realize his mistakes and salvage the relationship? Or would he continue to be controlled by his mother's influence? As I sat there, feeling the weight of the situation, I realized something I hadn't fully acknowledged before. Tom wasn't the man I thought I had married. The man I had fallen in love with was overshadowed by his mother's manipulations and his own inability to stand up for me. This wasn't just about a slap, it was about control, manipulation, and the slow erosion of my identity. The slap wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my awakening. The things I had ignored, the subtle control, the isolation, the constant undermining, suddenly became clear. I had to make a choice. I could either stay in this toxic relationship, always battling for my own voice, or I could leave and take back the power I had unknowingly given away. The truth hit me hard. This wasn't just a fight between a mother and her daughter-in-law. This was a fight for my own dignity, my right to be seen and respected for who I truly was. And as I stood up from that couch, surrounded by the overwhelming support of my friends and family, I knew I wasn't going to let this nightmare define me. The next step was clear. I was ready to stand up, to fight not only for myself but for the countless women out there who had silently endured the same struggles. This was my chance to be part of something bigger, to expose the toxic cycle and make sure it stopped with me.
I'm Miranda, a 30-year-old graphic designer, and I've always believed in the cliché that love conquers all. That belief was put to the test when I married Michael, the kindest man I've ever known, and met his mother Wendy, the exact opposite. Wendy, a part-time real estate agent in her mid-50s, had a reputation for being difficult, but it wasn't until I joined the family that I saw the extent of it. Michael and his sister Madison, a gentle soul and a school teacher, barely hid their disdain for her. Their father, Santiago, a retired military man, seldom mentioned her. I remember asking Michael one evening as we sat in our modest living room why he seemed to carry such a heavy heart when it came to his mother. He had always dodged the question, but that night he finally opened up. "Miranda, you know I love you for seeing the best in people, but with my mom, it's different," Michael said. His voice was heavy with understatement. "How so?" I pressed, my curiosity piqued. He sighed, looking away. "When Madison and I were kids, she maxed out credit cards in our names. Dad had to clear the debts to save our future. That's just the tip of the iceberg. She's selfish and greedy," Michael added. I was speechless. This was not the simple family drama I had expected. It was worse, much worse. As we planned our wedding, I had minimal contact with Wendy. Michael had distanced himself from her years ago, a decision I respected. But after we got married, her true nature became impossible to ignore. Calls for money became frequent, each one leaving Michael torn between duty and resentment. It was after we bought our first house, our dream home, that Wendy's greed escalated. The house was the result of our frugality and economy. But for Wendy, it was just another opportunity to exploit. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a series of events that would turn my life upside down. The first year of our marriage was a roller coaster. Michael and I, both passionate about our careers, worked long hours to make ends meet. We dreamed of a future filled with love and success, but Wendy's shadow loomed large over our happiness. Her calls for money became more demanding, each request laced with guilt and manipulation, chipping away at Michael's spirit. I saw the toll it took on him, the way his shoulders sagged every time his phone lit up with her name. "Our savings are barely growing, Miranda," Michael confessed one night, his voice laced with frustration. "Every time we take a step forward, Mom pushes us 2 steps back." I held his hand, trying to offer comfort, but words failed me. We were saving for a house, our dream home, yet with Wendy's constant demands, it seemed like an ever-receding goal. Then, finally, after months of frugality and extra freelance jobs on my part, we managed to gather enough for a down payment. The day we signed the papers for our house was bittersweet. We were ecstatic, yet there was a nagging fear of how Wendy would react. Our fears were not unfounded. When Wendy learned about the house, her greed knew no bounds. She visited us one day, her eyes scanning the space with barely concealed envy. "Quite the place you've got here," she remarked, a sly smile playing on her lips. "Must have cost a pretty penny. How could you afford this without my knowing?" Michael stiffened beside me. "We saved for it, Mom. It's our hard-earned money." Her response was a scoff. "Well, remember where your loyalties lie, Michael. I am still your mother." That visit was the beginning of an onslaught. The phone calls increased. The demands grew more outrageous. Wendy's entitlement knew no limits, and it strained our marriage to breaking point. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized the magnitude of the problem. Wendy wasn't just a nuisance. She was a threat to our future, our dreams, and our peace, and I knew something had to change. Our lives took a heartbreaking turn in the second year of our marriage. Michael was diagnosed with a rare medical condition. The diagnosis came too late, and despite our best efforts, he passed away within months. The world as I knew it shattered into a million pieces. Michael was my everything, my partner, my confidant, my best friend. Losing him felt like losing a part of myself. Grief engulfed me, threatening to pull me under. I remember sitting numbly at his funeral, feeling lost and alone in a sea of sympathetic faces. Wendy's reaction to Michael's death was chilling. At the funeral, she shed a few obligatory tears, but seemed more preoccupied than sorrowful. Her true intentions became clear in the days that followed. As we were still reeling from the loss, Wendy approached me with a cold, calculating look in her eyes. "Miranda, we need to talk about Michael's will and his assets," she said, her tone devoid of any maternal grief. I was appalled. "How can you be so callous, Wendy? Your son just died." But Wendy was unmoved. "I am his mother. I have rights to his assets." Her words stung, but what hurt more was the realization that Michael's death was just another opportunity for her. The nightmare intensified when I returned home from the funeral. I immediately sensed something amiss. A quick check confirmed my worst fears. Someone had broken into our house. Michael's personal belongings, including his wedding ring and our wedding album, were gone. Panic and despair overwhelmed me. Those items were more than just possessions. They were the last tangible memories of Michael. Who could stoop so low? Then came the call from Wendy, confirming my suspicions. "You've had time to grieve, Miranda. Now it's time to be practical. I want the house. Give it to me, or you'll never see Michael's things again," she finished. Her words were like a knife to my heart. Not only had I lost Michael, but now I was being blackmailed with his memories. Wendy's cruelty knew no bounds. I was left reeling, trying to navigate through the fog of my grief and the loving threat she posed in the wake of Michael's death and Wendy's appalling demand. I felt a surge of determination amidst my grief. I couldn't let Wendy dishonor Michael's memory and take away our home, a symbol of our love and dreams. It was time to take a stand. I reached out to Santiago and Madison, who were equally shocked and disgusted by Wendy's actions. We gathered at my house, the house that Michael and I had lovingly made our own. The air was heavy with grief and anger as I shared Wendy's ultimatum. Santiago, his eyes clouded with sorrow, shook his head. "I never thought she would stoop this low. Michael would be devastated to see this." Madison, fiery and resolute, suggested confronting Wendy, but I knew that would only escalate things. "No, we need to be smarter than that. She's holding Michael's belongings hostage. I can't risk losing them," I insisted. We brainstormed late into the night, piecing together a plan that would outwit Wendy at her own game. It was a risky move, but it was the only way to protect what Michael and I had built together. The following day, I called Wendy, feigning resignation. "I'll sign the house over to you, Wendy. Just please return Michael's things." Her tone was smug when she replied, "Smart decision, Miranda. I'll have the papers ready." But what Wendy didn't know was that the papers she would be signing were not what she expected. With the help of a lawyer friend, I prepared a set of documents that would turn the tables on her. The plan was set. I would go along with Wendy's demands until the right moment, then reveal the true nature of the documents she would so eagerly sign. It was a gamble, but it was our best shot at justice. As I lay in bed that night, I whispered a silent prayer to Michael, hoping he would understand and forgive me for the deception I was about to partake in. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was stronger. Wendy had taken so much from us. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. The day of the confrontation arrived with a mix of anxiety and determination swirling within me. I met Wendy at a local cafe, the official-looking documents neatly tucked in my bag. As expected, Wendy was brimming with confidence, unaware of the trap I had laid. She slyly presented the papers for me to sign, documents that would supposedly transfer my house to her. "I'm glad you're being sensible about this, Miranda," she said, a triumphant smirk on her face. I nodded silently, my hand trembling slightly as I signed the papers. But these were not the real transfer documents. They were a decoy, carefully crafted by my lawyer friend. After signing, I handed Wendy the set of documents I had brought. "There's just one more thing you need to sign, Wendy. It's a formality, really," I uttered. Wendy, too eager to claim her victory, didn't bother to read them. She quickly scribbled her signature, her eyes gleaming with greed. "It's done then. The house is mine. You have a month to move out," she declared, her voice oozing satisfaction. Little did she know the papers she had just signed were the real trap. I had transferred the ownership of her own house to me under the guise of a legal gift acceptance document. She had unknowingly signed away her home. The moment of revelation came a few days later at a grand party Wendy threw to celebrate her victory. I attended, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. As Wendy basked in the limelight bragging about her new acquisition, I knew it was time to unveil the truth. I stood up, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Wendy, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The house is still mine," I said, holding up the document she had signed. "You should have read what you were signing. You just transferred your house to me." The room fell silent, all eyes on Wendy, whose face drained of color. The realization of her blunder dawned on her, and for a moment she was speechless. I continued, "I have no intention of kicking you out, Wendy, but I won't be bullied or blackmailed. It's time you learned that actions have consequences," I uttered. Wendy was speechless, her scheme unraveling before her eyes. The party guests murmured among themselves, the air thick with tension and disbelief. I left the party with a heavy heart, but with a sense of closure. I had stood up to Wendy, not with vengeance, but with justice. Michael's memory was honored, and our home was safe. In the days following the party, the reality of her situation hit Wendy hard. She called me repeatedly, her voice alternating between begging and threatening, but I stood firm. The house she had so greedily coveted was now legally mine, and I had no intention of relinquishing it. Wendy's fall from grace was swift. Rumors of her act spread, and she was scorned by those she once considered her allies. Even Santiago and Madison, who had always maintained a cordial relationship with her for Michael's sake, turned their backs, unable to condone her behavior. Wendy's situation had driven her to the brink of despair, and she would not stop threatening me with reprisals. So I decided to break my promise and sell her house to show her I was serious. With the money from the sale of Wendy's house, I was able to pay off the mortgage on my own home. It was a bittersweet victory. The house was no longer a shared dream with Michael, but it remained a sanctuary filled with memories of our time together. I used some of the remaining funds to take Santiago and Madison on a vacation. It was a much-needed break for all of us, a chance to heal and bond over shared memories of Michael. As for Wendy, the last I heard, she had moved to a small apartment, her days of luxury long gone. I threatened her that if her threats didn't stop, I would report her to the police. After that, her threats stopped. The community she once manipulated had no place for her anymore. It was a harsh lesson, but one brought upon by her own actions. Life has a way of moving forward, even when we feel stuck in a moment of grief. It's been a year since Michael passed, and each day is a small step in a journey of healing. I often sit in the garden Michael and I loved, reflecting on the twists and turns life has taken. The pain of losing him will always be a part of me, but I've learned to cherish the memories and embrace the future. Wendy remains a distant figure, a shadow of her former self. I occasionally hear about her struggles, but I feel no joy in her downfall. It's a sad end to a life consumed by greed and manipulation. As for me, I continue to work, create, and live in the home that Michael and I built together. It's a place of love, memories, and now a testament to resilience. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to face it with the strength that Michael always believed I had. My name is Liv. I work as a nurse at the hospital. My husband Elijah and I are about to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary. I work full-time as a nurse and earn a decent income. However, 2 years ago, Elijah got into a dispute over a capital increase at the company, where he was on the verge of a promotion and ended up being fired. He then worked part-time at the supermarket in a neighboring town until he became a full-time employee 6 months ago. Although he became a full-time employee, his monthly salary wasn't particularly high, and our life was far from affluent. Ever since Elijah was laid off, I've been supporting him with my sole income during the 2-month period of his unemployment. Despite being the cause of his own dismissal, He never seemed to think he was at fault, and continued his daily beer drinking habit without switching to low-alcohol beer. I've mentioned a few times to Elijah that I wanted to save some money and tighten our budget a bit, but he responded with an overly optimistic attitude, saying, "Liv, you're earning enough, so there shouldn't be a problem, right? We even have some savings as a couple." We thought our savings as a couple were still there. It's true that we had some savings, but that was a few years ago. We used most of our savings as a down payment for our house, which we built 1 year after getting married. We still have over 25 years left on the mortgage. That's when Elijah got into trouble at work and got fired. Honestly, I became anxious about our future as a couple, but Elijah assumed that I, being a nurse, would continue to earn money, and he continued his unchanged lifestyle. Now he has become an employee, and although his salary isn't high, he receives a certain fixed income. Lately, I've also been leading a somewhat settled daily life. One day during my break at work, I opened my smartphone and received a message from Elijah. "Mom fell down the stairs and got injured. It's going to be difficult for her to live a normal life for a while." Worried, I called my mother-in-law. To my surprise, she scolded me, saying, "What are you calling for? If you're really concerned, come and see for yourself." It seems that the message had also reached Elijah because when I returned home, he gave me a severe scolding. "So you called my mother, huh? If you were a normal daughter-in-law, you would have gone to check on her immediately. Which is more important, your job or your duty as a daughter-in-law?" I thought it wasn't a life-threatening situation, but there was no point in arguing with Elijah at times like this, so I apologized sincerely. "I'm sorry, I have a day off tomorrow, so I'll go and check on your mother." "Of course you will. Take care of her daily needs, okay?" he said. Who does he think he is? If he's going to say that, why doesn't he take care of her himself? While I had those thoughts, I reluctantly accepted Elijah's suggestion. The next day, when I went to my mother-in-law's house, a caregiver was there. Seems like if she applies, she could get herself a caregiver for free while her leg gets better. Even when I visited the house, she said, "I don't need your help. A kind caregiver is here for me," and promptly kicked me out. Moreover, it seemed that Elijah knew a caregiver had been coming. When I told Elijah, "Well, then I guess I shouldn't have come," he replied, "It's obvious that I wanted my concerns to be understood by my mother. That's where you fall short." Nis words hurt me and I cursed. Frustrated by Elijah's remark, I couldn't help but get angry. "Stop saying whatever you want. I have a job too. Do you know how I felt when you quit your job without consulting me?" I said angrily. I shouted at him and he just replied, "What are you so angry about?" Then he went back to his room. From the next day on, Elijah started treating me like I was invisible and began visiting my mother-in-law's house frequently. He would come straight home on work days, but on his days off, he would go to my mother-in-law's house every day. Being at home meant that I asked him to help out around the house, so I guess he thought it was easier to escape to my mother-in-law's house where a caregiver was present. After enduring such a life for about 3 months, one day, Elijah, who had been practically ignoring me every day, suddenly approached me as if nothing had happened. "Liv, when are you going to quit your current job?" he asked. "Quit my job?" I was surprised because I had never discussed quitting my job before. "I've never mentioned anything about quitting my job, have I? I actually like my current job and honestly, I haven't even thought about quitting," I objected. "But you can't keep doing it forever, can you? Besides, my mom is in the condition she is now. If she needs more and more care, it will be up to you, Liv, to take care of her." He spoke as if it was natural to care for her all the time. "Hold on a second, we never talked about that. Besides, you said I would never be asked to take care of your mother. It was a promise we made before we got married," I replied. Since I loved my job, I told him at the time that I didn't want to be a full-time housewife, or living with my parents would be difficult for me. In response, Elijah said, "I would never force you, Liv, to do something you don't want to do for my family. I know you love your current job, and I'm fine with you working as much as you want, so I want you to marry me." That's what he said. Were those words back then just lies? I said it loudly, and he replied, "I didn't expect my mom to get injured, so it can't be helped. Or what? Should I quit my job and take care of my mom? Is that what you want? Are you okay with having to support me and my mom?" he asked indignantly. "That's a different story, isn't it? Besides, if I quit my job, our finances will be tight. It's impossible, I defended myself. Honestly, I make more money than Elijah, and it would be easier if he'd quit his job instead of me quitting mine. But even during his unemployment period, Elijah had such an arrogant attitude. When it comes to quitting my job and taking care of my mother-in-law, he might start saying things like, "I'm taking care of my mother, unlike you. It's harder than work, you know. Show some respect. If you don't want it that way, then let's get a divorce," he finished. I was getting frustrated, not knowing what to do, and I lost for words. "What do you mean? Are you serious?" I asked, and Elijah smiled and added, "I don't have confidence in continuing with a wife who can't value my family. I'm seriously considering divorce." Hold on a second. We don't have to jump straight to divorce. If we think it through, there might be a better solution. When I said that, Elijah replied, "Then figure something out with your job. You don't have to quit, just reduce your hours or something. For the sake of my mother, you should fulfill your role as a proper wife," he shouted at me. "Okay, calm down. Let's talk it through again," I said, and we set up a calm discussion. To be honest, I was prepared for divorce, even if it meant getting a divorce. But I really loved this home we built after getting married. Having a home of our own after marriage had always been a dream, and it was a house I had proudly put my own preferences into. So I didn't want to let go of this house. It was a comfortable home filled with things I loved. Furthermore, it had only been the 5th year of our marriage. With my husband, is it really okay to easily get a divorce over something like this? That's what I thought, and reluctantly I decided to accept Elijah's suggestion. I've been working full-time 5 days a week, but now I reduced it to 4 days a week. I also changed my working hours to part-time instead of full-time. My co-workers expressed their disappointment, but the one most disappointed was myself. I had to distance myself from a job I loved, but in order to maintain my relationship with my husband, I had to endure this. With that determination, I started supporting my mother-in-law's life. After that, I began visiting my mother-in-law's house, and from the first day, her attitude was terrible, probably because the caregivers stopped coming. As soon as I started coming, my mother-in-law kept complaining to me saying, "You still can't do anything. The food isn't even tasty. Do you really have the intention to support me?" She continued to criticize me, despite my earnest efforts to take care of her. Occasionally, when my husband visited my mother-in-law's house after work, he would laugh together with my mother-in-law while I desperately took care of her. "You are really clumsy, aren't you? Did I marry the wrong wife? Sorry, Mom, for this useless daughter-in-law," he said, and they both laughed heartily. I was sacrificing my beloved job to do all this, and yet I thought that if I returned, it would only come back at me multiple times. It was evident to me, so I didn't say anything in return. One day, something happened. My mother-in-law was taking a nap in the living room, so I decided to clean her bedroom, which I hadn't done in a while. As I entered the room, I noticed some documents placed casually on a small desk. Although I thought I shouldn't look at them, my curiosity got the better of me, and I couldn't help but take a peek. To my surprise, I found out that my mother-in-law's legs had already recovered considerably, and she could live a normal life. The documents indicated that as a result, the contract with the caregiver, who had been dispatched free of charge, would end at the end of last month. "What's this? What does it mean?" I resented. My husband and mother-in-law said to me, "We can't trouble others, your family, so show some care." But in reality, it wasn't for such a noble reason. It was simply because they couldn't receive a free caregiver anymore, so they were looking for a replacement housekeeper. "What is this? I'm not just a housekeeper." I continued to be outraged. At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. What had I been working so hard for until now? It felt like everything had become pointless. My mother-in-law had pretended her legs were still not healed just to keep me doing chores for her, and my husband must have known that, which is why he wanted me to quit my job as soon as possible. Thinking about that, everything seemed so absurd. I suddenly remembered when my husband mentioned wanting a divorce, and so I made sure to withdraw exactly half the money from our joint account and transferred it to my own. Unfortunately, today my husband is coming home to his mother's house. I decided to make the final dinner an exceptionally lavish one, so I went shopping and returned to my mother-in-law's house. When I returned, my mother-in-law had already woken up from her nap. "Where were you? Leaving your disabled mother-in-law behind and going out like that?" she said with a complaint, even though she had already recovered. While thinking that, I simply smiled and said, "I went out to buy ingredients for dinner." My mother-in-law rambled, but I ignored it all and started preparing dinner. I decided to make my husband's favorite beef stew. A few hours later, my husband returned from work. I'm tired. "Is it beef stew today?" "Fantastic," he said happily as he took his seat. I served dinner in front of my mother-in-law and husband. "It looks quite rich. I wonder if it really tastes delicious," my husband said to my mother-in-law. "Well, it's really too decent compared to her usual repertoire. Just give it a try, Mom." They were so disrespectful, but knowing that this was the last time, I naturally felt more relaxed. "Can I say something?" I asked. As I was about to start the conversation, my husband interrupted me. "Liv, starting from next month, we'll be living in this house with my mom." "Huh? No way," I exclaimed. "Considering Mom's condition, it would be reassuring to live together, right?" he continued. "It's a waste to just keep the house where we still have a mortgage, so we decided to sell it and live with Mom," he said calmly, matter-of-factly. I reached my breaking point and said, "Do as you please. I won't be living here, though." "What are you saying? As my wife, you have to continue to take care of my mom." He looked down on me and sneered. In return, I sneered back and said, "Wife? Who are you talking about? We were getting a divorce, by the way." My husband was dumbfounded by the word divorce, and my mother-in-law dropped the broccoli she was holding with her fork. To the bewildered pair, I explained, "Remember when you said you wanted a divorce? So let's get divorced. Oh, by the way, I made sure to take exactly half of our savings as well. I'll pack up the house tomorrow and go back to my parents." Well done saying that, I took off my apron and started preparing to leave. Then my husband suddenly shouted, "Wait a minute, it's terrible for you to decide on your own like that." "Decide on my own without permission? Who is the one who first mentioned wanting a divorce? Besides, it was you who said we can't continue as a married couple, right?" I was freaking out. As I said that, my husband turned pale and hung his head. "But that doesn't mean you'd have to rush into this. Are you planning to abandon me even with my leg condition?" My mother-in-law intervened. Since my mother-in-law said it from the side, I asked directly, "Your leg is healed, right? Huh?" My mother-in-law froze in response to my unexpected statement. "I happened to see some documents in your room. Mother-in-law, it seems your leg has improved a lot." "That's good news," I continued. As I said that, my mother-in-law's face gradually turned pale. "Please, Liv, I was wrong. Please forgive me," my husband pleaded multiple times, but I said goodbye and I left my mother-in-law's house. With my legs as they were, I headed to the house where my husband and I had been living. I packed all the belongings and loaded them into the car, heading towards my parents' house. This house, which I had never wanted to let go of, somehow didn't seem so important anymore. It felt like a betrayal even though we had built it with hopes for the future. Such painful feelings overwhelmed me. Towards the end, I had to spend more time at my mother-in-law's house, so perhaps it was inevitable that my attachments to our home had diminished. Is it okay to feel that way? With those thoughts in mind, I returned to my parents' house. Even after returning home, I received numerous calls from my husband and mother-in-law, but I ignored them all. Through a lawyer, I only claimed half the amount from the sale of the house that my husband had sold. However, it seems that the amount was not as high as my husband had expected, and he appears to be living a desperate life every day. On the other hand, I was able to return to my beloved job full-time and found fulfillment in enjoying each day from now on. I want my work and my mind to stay with me despite the sudden return after my divorce. Do you have a moment? The doctor's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see a concerned expression on his face. It had been a decade since my mother-in-law had become wheelchair-bound, and her regular hospital visits for checkups and physical therapy had become routine. On this particular day, I was sitting in the waiting room, patiently waiting for her to finish her tests. I nodded at the doctor, curious about the urgency in his eyes. "Of course, doctor. What's the matter?" He motioned for me to follow him to a more private area, away from the bustling waiting room. "I need to speak with you about something important regarding your mother-in-law." Confusion gnawed at me as I followed him. Her primary doctor was a woman, and I hadn't heard of any changes in her medical team. Why would a different doctor want to talk about my mother-in-law? We settled into a small consultation room and he locked the door behind us, heightening my sense of unease. "My name is Audrey," I introduced myself, trying to ease the tension. The doctor's gaze bore into mine as he spoke in a hushed tone. "I need to tell you something that neither your mother-in-law nor her primary doctor should hear. That's why I only want to tell you." My curiosity deepened and I leaned in closer. "Only me? What's going on?" I asked. As I waited for the doctor to explain, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. "My name is Audrey, and I'm a 38-year-old office worker. I have been working remotely lately, a change in my usual routine. My childhood had been marked by the absence of my mother, who had left our home when I was just a child. Raised by my hard-working father, I had heard stories of my mother, Nevaeh, being a spendthrift who had abandoned her family. My parents eventually divorced, and my father's dedication allowed me to pursue higher education and secure a job, even if it wasn't at a prestigious firm. My husband Patrick and I have been married for 14 years. When we married, his father had already passed away, and his mother Parker had welcomed me into their family with open arms. Parker was once a vibrant and cheerful woman, but a car accident had left her wheelchair-bound, robbing her of her vitality. The accident had taken a toll on her mental state, and she had become withdrawn. Concerned for her well-being, Patrick and I decided to move back into her family home to provide her with care. We took a week off from work to dedicate our time to her, with the intention of returning to our jobs once she was feeling better. Parker's face had brightened when we first arrived, but as the days passed, she became increasingly reluctant to let us leave. It was as if she couldn't bear the thought of being alone. Even when I worked from home, she clung to me, making it impossible for me to bring her into view of my coworkers. Patrick, on the other hand, went above and beyond, taking days off from work to assist with her care. Despite years of physical therapy, there was no improvement in her condition, trapping me in a cycle of constant care and confinement. A decade had passed since we had moved back to take care of Parker. She had turned 65, and with each passing year, her dependence on us had grown. The strain on our personal lives had become overwhelming, leading Patrick to reduce his visits over time. Parker's fear of being alone intensified, making it nearly impossible for me to leave her even for a few minutes. My personal life had all but disappeared, and resentment had begun to creep in. The breaking point came when a new doctor, Dr. Reese, who had gotten up to speed. On the day of Parker's routine checkup, he stopped me in the hallway, asking if I was Parker's daughter. I confirmed my identity, puzzled by his inquiry. He led me into a private room away from prying eyes, and began to speak in earnest. "You've been living with Parker to take care of her, right?" I nodded, not sure where this conversation was headed. "Yes, for the past 10 years I've been working remotely from her home while providing her with care," I replied. Dr. Reese listened intently as I began to share my frustrations and the toll it had taken on my personal life. Then his expression grew grave, and he started to reveal something that would shatter the reality I had known. As Dr. Reese began to speak, my mind struggled to process the information he was sharing. His words were like a sledgehammer, demolishing the facade of the life I had built with Parker over the past decade. However, what reached my ears wasn't Dr. Reese's words, but a scream from Parker, coming from the examination room. Panic surged through both of us, and we rushed to the room, fearing the worst. The sight that greeted us was beyond comprehension. Parker, my mother-in-law, was standing on her own 2 feet, walking without the aid of her wheelchair or cane. It was a sight I hadn't witnessed in years, and it left me speechless. Dr. Reese wasted no time. He turned to me with a sense of urgency. "You need to leave her house immediately, Audrey. Get away from your mother-in-law." Suppressing the shock and anger that welled up inside me, I nodded in agreement. We rushed to pack my belongings, and I called Patrick to explain everything. It was a painful conversation, one that left him as stunned as I had been. Once I was safely away from Parker's home, Dr. Reese began to explain the shocking truth. "Your mother-in-law, Parker, has been deceiving you for years, Audrey." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. My mind raced to comprehend what he was saying. Deceiving me? How is that even possible? Dr. Reese sighed, clearly burdened by the revelation he was about to share. Parker's wheelchair-bound condition is not real. It's a deception she has maintained for years with the help of her primary doctor, Dr. Miller. My heart sank, and anger bubbled up within me. Why on earth would she do such a thing? And why would her doctor go along with it? The doctor's expression darkened. Money, Audrey. It's all about money. Your mother-in-law has been receiving disability benefits for years, and she wanted live-in care, which is where you came in. Dr. Miller, well, let's just say he had his own motives, he finished. The drive back to Parker's house was fraught with tension. Dr. Reese had accompanied me, and together we faced the woman who had deceived me for a decade. As we entered the house, I was struck by the feeling of betrayal and anger that welled up within me. Parker was sitting in her wheelchair as if nothing had happened. She looked up at me with a mixture of surprise and fear when she saw Dr. Reese and me. Audrey, you're back early, she stammered, trying to maintain her facade. I couldn't contain my anger any longer. Parker, how could you do this to me? To us? Tears welled up in her eyes as she struggled to explain herself. I didn't want to be alone, Audrey. I needed someone to take care of me, and I didn't know how to do it. Dr. Reese chimed in, his voice stern. Parker, this deception has gone on for far too long. It's time to come clean and face the consequences of your actions. Parker's confession was a painful revelation. She admitted to feigning her disability for financial gain and emotional support. Dr. Miller had been her accomplice, falsifying medical records to maintain the illusion of her condition. As the truth came to light, my anger began to transform into a mixture of sympathy and disappointment. I couldn't condone her actions, but I could understand the deep loneliness and desperation that had driven her to such extreme measures. Dr. Reese reported the deception to the authorities, setting in motion a legal investigation into Parker's case. The consequences for her and Dr. Miller would be severe, but it was a necessary step toward justice. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings. Parker faced the loss of her home, her reputation in ruins, and the prospect of criminal charges. Patrick and I, now living in a rented apartment, were left to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives. The trust we had once held for Parker was replaced by a profound sense of betrayal. Our marriage was strained as we struggled to come to terms with the deception that had torn our family apart. With the legal case against Parker and Dr. Miller underway, I found myself torn between anger and a desire for closure. I needed answers, and I confronted Parker one last time. Parker, why did you do it? I asked, sitting across from her in the courtroom where she awaited her trial. Tears welled up in her eyes as she struggled to find the words. I was so lonely, Audrey. After the accident, I felt like I lost everything. I didn't want to burden you and Patrick, so I thought this was the only way to have someone by my side. My heart ached for her, but the wounds of betrayal ran deep. I had spent a decade of my life caring for her under false pretenses, sacrificing my own happiness and well-being. Parker's actions had consequences that extended far beyond her own life. As the trial concluded, Parker and Dr. Miller were sentenced to community service and required to repay the disability benefits they had wrongfully received. It was a bittersweet victory, as our family had already been irreparably damaged. Patrick and I sought counseling to navigate the emotional aftermath of the deception. Trust, once shattered, was difficult to rebuild, and we faced a long road to healing. The story continued with twists and turns as we embarked on a journey to rebuild our lives and find a way forward. The path to forgiveness was uncertain, but we were determined to move beyond the shadows of deception and betrayal. Rebuilding our lives had become the focal point of our existence. With Parker's deception now exposed and the legal proceedings concluded, Patrick and I faced the daunting task of moving forward. We decided to relocate to a new city, hoping that a change of scenery would help us leave the painful memories behind. The apartment we rented was a blank canvas, a symbol of the fresh start we so desperately needed. As I unpacked our belongings, I couldn't help but reflect on the past decade. The sacrifices I had made, the years I had devoted to Parker's care, and the betrayal that had shaken the foundation of our family were all part of a painful history. But now, we had the opportunity to define a new chapter in our lives. Rebuilding trust in our marriage was an arduous journey. The wounds of deception ran deep, and both Patrick and I carried the scars of the past, but we were committed to healing, and that commitment propelled us forward. Counseling sessions became a lifeline for us. We learned to communicate openly about our feelings, fears, and insecurities. Slowly but surely, the walls that had separated us began to crumble, replaced by a newfound sense of understanding and empathy. Patrick's dedication to our relationship was unwavering. He apologized for his initial absence and recognized the toll it had taken on our marriage. I too acknowledged my own role in enabling Parker's deception by not questioning her condition sooner. In our new city, we established a daily routine that allowed us to nurture our relationship while pursuing our individual passions. Patrick resumed his career, and I embraced the opportunity to explore new career paths. The remote work environment had opened up new possibilities, and I was determined to make the most of them. One evening, as Patrick and I sat on our balcony sipping wine and watching the sunset, he turned to me with a smile. "You know, Audrey, we're finally living for ourselves," Patrick uttered. I nodded in agreement, feeling a sense of liberation I hadn't experienced in years. "Yes, we are, and it's about time," I said. With the physical and emotional distance from Parker, we had the chance to reconnect with our extended family. Patrick's sister Daisy had been estranged from Parker for years, but we reached out to her, hoping to mend the fractured bonds of their family. Daisy's response was hesitant at first, but she eventually agreed to meet us. Over time, our relationship with her grew stronger, and we welcomed her into our lives. It was a reminder that family could be chosen, not just defined by blood. As the months turned into years, we received news about Parker. Her health had deteriorated, and she had been moved to a nursing home. Although our relationship with her remained strained, we couldn't ignore the fact that she was still family. Patrick and I decided to visit her one last time, seeking a semblance of closure. The nursing home was a stark contrast to the home where we had once lived. Parker was frail and bedridden, a far cry from the woman who had deceived us for so long. We sat by her bedside holding her hand, and I found it within me to forgive her for the pain she had caused. It wasn't a complete absolution of her actions, but it was a step toward healing our own wounds. Parker's passing marked the end of a tumultuous chapter in our lives. The decade of deception had left scars that would never fully fade, but we had emerged stronger and more resilient. Patrick and I continued to build our lives together, forging a bond that had weathered the storm of betrayal. We embraced the opportunities our new city offered, and I found fulfillment in a career that had once seemed out of reach. The story of our family's deception served as a poignant reminder that truth, forgiveness, and love could triumph over even the darkest of deceptions. Our journey had been painful, but it had ultimately led us to a place of healing and renewal. My name is Eleanor. Recently, I celebrated my 35th birthday. A few days ago, my husband Walker and I celebrated our third wedding anniversary. Walker works for a very well-known company and takes care of me every day. We have a fulfilling married life with no complaints. Although I graduated from college, I was originally supposed to take over my father's company. However, I couldn't give up on my childhood dream of becoming a nursery school teacher. Taking advantage of the money I had saved during my college years, I immediately enrolled in a vocational school for early childhood education after graduation. I have no regrets about this decision, even now. But of course, my father strongly opposed it when I said I wanted to be a nursery school teacher. Taking care of children is a job anyone can do. You are the only daughter who can inherit my company, he constantly told me. There was a time when I wondered if I would end up like that in the future. However, this is my one and only life. Even when I was studying business administration in college, I occasionally read books about childcare to study. So my determination at the time was firm, and no matter how much my father opposed, I had no intention of giving up. "If you won't listen to me, then leave and never come back," my father stated. With those words from my father, I left home. While attending vocational college, I continued to work part-time and somehow managed to graduate, fulfilling my long-cherished dream of working in a nursery. One day, in the 5th year of being a nursery school teacher, I was invited to a home party by a fellow teacher who worked at the same nursery. There, I met Walker, who gave me a kind impression. We were attracted to each other and started dating. After 2 years of being together, we got married, and here we are now. My relationship with my parents was almost like being strangers, so I hadn't really informed them properly, but I was happy. I was delighted to have Walker, who cherished me so much, and every day felt fulfilling. However, a certain incident pushed me to the depth of despair. Let's go back a year and a half. Walker proposed to me, and I immediately accepted. Knowing the circumstances of my family, Walker told me that we didn't need to have a formal meeting between our families. Instead, I would visit Walker's parents and introduce myself. The first impression of Walker's parents was that they seemed very kind. When I mentioned that I had very little contact with my own family, my mother-in-law said, "That's not uncommon these days. Just think of us as your real parents." Her warm words touched me. I thought I had visited people I could become part of a family with, so I married Walker. However, reality was not as sweet as I had hoped. In the beginning of our marriage, I frequently visited Walker's parents on long weekends, Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays, and so on. Eleanor, you're a poor child who doesn't know the love of parents, right? Being poor means you've never even had a proper meal from your mother, right? Don't hesitate. Feel free to eat. My in-laws may not have had evil intentions, but I was treated as poor just because I was disconnected from my parents, and being told that I've never felt loved was painful. Eleanor, we took you in as our daughter-in-law. Don't force poverty on Walker just because you're used to being poor and still working as a low-paying nursery teacher. Every time my mother-in-law said that, tears welled up. It's true that being a nursery teacher doesn't come with a high salary, but I loved working with young children. There's no other job where I can witness the growth of children up close. Being able to watch over them is such a precious job. As someone who became a nursery teacher with that thought, my mother-in-law's words hit me hard. Walker got angry and defended me every time my relatives hurt me, but it was the truth. That's why my father-in-law and mother-in-law said it without any remorse. Returning to Walker's parents' house became a burden, and the frequency of my visits decreased gradually. But then my mother-in-law started sending me texts one after another. When will I see my grandchild? Eleanor, you are already at an age where you should quit your job and focus on getting pregnant. Women who can't earn well should obviously stay at home, right? I endured the days of such unpleasant remarks. To top it off, my father-in-law even called me when he knew Walker was at work. Stop burdening our son. If you're living in poverty, handle it on your own. He joined my mother-in-law in hurling abuse at me, but I couldn't tell my husband about any of this. I kept it all inside and pretended as if nothing was wrong whenever I was with him. However, there came a breaking point for me, an event that pushed me to my limit. "We are having a gathering with our relatives soon," read a message from my mother-in-law. I showed up at my mother-in-law's house with Walker after a long absence. Upon arrival, Walker's parents and siblings were all gathered, and I greeted them all. In the midst of it, my mother-in-law spoke up. "Can I have everyone's attention, please? I'd like you to meet Walker's wife, Eleanor. She grew up poor and is no longer in contact with her parents, so please be kind to her, okay?" In that moment, I felt so embarrassed that tears fell out. Sure, I was also at fault for not explaining my parents' situation in detail, but why did it have to be said like this? Shame and frustration overwhelmed me. I couldn't hold back my tears and kept my head down. "Enough already!" Those words were shouted by Walker. Everyone looked at us in surprise as Walker's usually gentle voice turned into a shout. "Both Mom and Dad, cut it out already. What the hell do you know about Eleanor? You don't even know what feelings she had when she left her family home, and you keep saying whatever you want." Unable to contain my emotions, I couldn't help but shed tears at Walker's genuine anger for my sake. However, disregarding both my and Walker's feelings, my father-in-law spoke. "Walker, you are being deceived, you know. You are just being used by this poor woman for money." Following my father-in-law's words, my mother-in-law chimed in. "That's right, Walker. Don't be fooled, okay? You're just being taken advantage of. There's no love from Eleanor, I'm sure of it." Hearing such heartless words, I was left speechless. All the frustration and sadness I felt just a moment ago vanished completely. What? What are they saying? Was the only question that crossed my mind. "Let's go," Walker told me. With those words, Walker grabbed my hand and we left. The angry voices of my in-laws continued to echo from behind, but Walker ignored it all, put me in the car, and drove us home. After arriving home, Walker spoke. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. It's because of my parents." "It's okay. Thank you for always standing up for me." As we exchanged those words, the tension in the air slightly eased, but I noticed that I had a missed call from my mother. When I checked my phone, seeing the call history from my mother, whom I hadn't contacted in a while, I had a bad feeling and immediately called her back. Then my mother answered right away. "It's been a while, Mom," I said, but there was no response from my mother, although the call was definitely connected. "Mom, can you hear me? Did something happen?" I asked. Then my mother murmured softly, "Your father had an accident." I was drawn up by the sudden news. He was taken to the hospital by an ambulance and is currently undergoing emergency surgery. The doctors say it's a complicated procedure. My mother told me why, but I was also in a state of shock and couldn't process the information. Seeing that I was in such a state, Walker took my phone and continued the conversation on my behalf. "Nice to meet you, mother-in-law. This is Walker," he said. My mother, surprised by the pain in Walker's voice, asked, "What's going on?" "I'm sorry to barge in on your conversation, but Elle is in shock. Can you tell me about the current situation?" Walker asked gently. After a composed response, we understood the situation with my father, including which hospital he was in, and we followed Walker there. Upon arriving, my mother was looking dejected. When she noticed me, she said, "Elle, it's been a while. Thank you for coming." Tears welled up in her eyes, and seeing her face, tears naturally welled up in mine as well. I introduced Walker to my mother, and while listening to the details of the accident, the attending physician arrived. "Your husband's surgery was successful. He will regain consciousness with time," he uttered. "Doctor, thank you so much, thank you," my mother and I said, breaking down in tears on the spot. Watching us, Walker was also relieved, which was reflected on his face. The next day my father regained consciousness, and I apologized for the past. "Dad, I'm sorry for what happened. I acted thoughtlessly." Honestly, I didn't expect to be forgiven, however. My father's response was different from what I imagined. "No, I'm the one who should apologize," he said. "Huh?" I wondered. "I thought it would be best for you to take over my company. I couldn't respect your own aspirations, and I was a lousy father," he said, smiling through his tears. Naturally, tears streamed down my face as well. "Thank you, Dad," I said through my tears. I introduced Walker to my father, and he was delighted. Since we couldn't make a formal introduction before, it was decided that we would visit Walker's parents' house, once my father was discharged from the hospital, to properly greet them. After a few weeks, my father was safely discharged from the hospital. We headed to Walker's parents' house with my father driving. We had informed Walker's parents about our visit, but they had texted me the day before. "We don't need greetings from a poor family like yours." However, my father was determined, and we headed to Walker's parents' house in his prized car. When we arrived and rang the doorbell, my mother-in-law, who seemed in a sour mood, came out. She widened her eyes upon seeing my father's car. "Is that by any chance?" "Yes, it's my father's car," I said. My mother-in-law hurried back to call my father-in-law. "Honey, something's up. Come quickly." I could hear her shouting from inside the house. "What's going on?" My annoyed father-in-law came out, and he too widened his eyes upon seeing my father's car. "What's that expensive Porsche doing here?" he asked. "It's mine," my father answered with a smile. "Excuse me, but what do Elle's parents do for a living?" my mother-in-law asked, her eyes wide. "I'm the CEO of the ABC Group," my father answered. "The ABC Group? That's a highly famous company now, isn't it?" father-in-law asked. "Yeah, my dad runs a company so famous that no one has to know about it. That's why we had to cut ties. And I hadn't told my in-laws in detail about it." Then, as if their previous attitude had been a lie, my in-laws started praising me. "No wonder I thought Elle was a wonderful young lady," my mother-in-law said. "Huh?" My inner voice slipped out unintentionally. "No wonder I thought you were well brought up. It's obvious just by looking at your face," my father-in-law added. To maintain a good relationship, I couldn't stay silent. Thinking that way, I desperately tried to suppress my emotions when Walker, who was by my side, spoke up. "Stop it, you damn parents of mine." My usually gentle Walker's profanity stunned my in-laws. "What's gotten into you, Walker? You have a good wife and you are happy, aren't you?" my mother-in-law said desperately. "Who are you to say that? You've been mocking Elle all along." Walker expressed his anger, his tone changing. "What does that mean?" my father reacted. "Well, you see, it's not like that. It's a misunderstanding," my in-laws hurriedly tried to cover up. "You judged Elle as poor without any basis, making her a laughingstock in front of relatives, haven't you? Not only that, you've been constantly making nasty remarks to Eleanor herself. Even though I warned you, you never listened. Now that you know Elle's parents are amazing people, you're changing your attitude. It's disgusting." Walker shouted at his parents with an intensity I had never seen before. Upon hearing that, my father spoke up as well. "Walker's parents, I appreciate you accepting Eleanor as your daughter-in-law, but if you are going to treat my precious daughter that way, I will take appropriate action." My father had a smile on his face, but his eyes showed no amusement. Seeing my father like that, my in-laws' expressions twisted further. In the midst of it all, it was Walker who delivered the final blow. "I want nothing to do with despicable people like you as my family. After today, I'm cutting ties," Walker said angrily. "Huh?" Taken aback by Walker's sudden declaration of estrangement, my in-laws panicked. "Wait a minute, what are you saying?" "Walker, let's not be hasty. You settle down and we'll live together from now on, including Eleanor's family," they pleaded. "Don't say convenient things. I will never consider you both as my parents again," Walker said, and turned and walked away. "Excuse us." My father followed Walker's lead as I was about to leave as well. "Wait, Eleanor," my mother-in-law shouted. "I apologize for everything that happened until now, so please don't cut ties," she said. "That's right, Elle. We've been like parents to you, haven't we?" father-in-law continued. "Parents? Give me a break. After you have trampled on people's feelings and treated them cruelly countless times?" I suppressed the rising anger and turned around to speak. "Thank you for everything. Goodbye," I said, heading toward the car where my father and Walker were waiting. They stood there in stunned silence. In this, I was simultaneously liberated from the pain of my in-laws and severed ties with my parents. Since then, I don't live with my parents, but we regularly meet up for meals. My father has taken a liking to Walker and seems to be planning to pass on his company to him in the future. In response to my father's expectations, Walker is working hard every day. I have nothing but gratitude for Walker, who not only freed me from the shackles of my in-laws, but also gets along well with my own parents. As for me, I am still working as a nursery teacher. My father now approves of my choice and seems to be supporting me. Surrounded by the people I love and cherish, my life is truly joyful.